Welcome to Beyond the Noise, the podcast series from PRWeek. I'm John Harrington, the editor of PRWeek UK. I'm delighted to be joined today by Simon Whitehead, UK Chief Executive of the newly formed PR agency titan Burson. Simon, welcome to the show. How are you?
I'm very well. Thanks for having me, John.
Pleasure. For those who don't know, Burson officially launched last month from the mega merger of WPP agencies BCW and Hill & Knowlton. The newly combined agency has more than 6,000 employees in 43 markets and around $1.3 billion in annual revenue. So, loads to discuss. But before we get stuck in, I thought I'd get your view on something we've all been talking about in the last few days, Labour's landslide election victory. Yeah. You actually worked for the Conservative Party, didn't you, in the late 90s?
A very long time ago, for a couple of years with John Major. I was in central office, and my goodness, a lot has changed in politics since then. But it was really my first introduction to communications and campaigning. And here I am 30 years later. And what an exciting sort of piece to see again a Labour landslide like it was in 1997.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary to be in there in 97 and extraordinary to see it happening all over again now.
Absolutely, yeah. So what do you make of the campaign, and how do you feel about, the prospects of a Starmer government and what it might mean for the industry?
Well, of course, the campaign was sprung on people by Rishi Sunak. I mean, he went earlier than people thought he would. I think that's very good. And by the way, I think that's very good for the PR industry, and I'll talk about that in a minute. I think the campaign itself was not as high octane as I might have imagined, but I think that was on purpose. I think Starmer and the team were very calculated in the way that they approached it, the way that they won seats. They spent money not necessarily getting huge majorities in the seats where they would win. They spread the money very well. They played a very canny social media game, and I think were exceptional and worthy winners, even with such a low turnout and with such a low vote for them. I think the stars of the show were clearly Nigel Farage, and his Gen Z TikTok following is growing, and the fact that he got 4 million votes is a difficult thing for the country, but at the same time shows how much social media, I think, is now impacting voters and getting into different audience groups. And of course, Ed Davey with the Lib Dems, who went with a stunt show, which was quite clever and was different for him and showed his humanity, his authenticity, but also then tied that to different issues that he was trying to bring to the fore, particularly his one of his lead pieces, which is about social care. And what an incredible way that he managed to combine stunts with social care and bring his own life into it. I'm afraid the Tories really never got started. And what a damp squib it was from the very first day when Sunak was rained on, all the way through to the disasters that went on, leaving D-Day early. Mistake or not, it doesn't matter. There was then a debate about that. And of course, many other pieces along the way, including the whole gambling issue. So I don't think the Tories got out of the block. I think Labour had it planned and did exceptionally well. And I think the two groups that came forward with probably the best campaigns were the Liberal Democrats and of course Reform.
Yeah, no, I'm inclined to agree with you. I think, Labour's Ming Vase strategy really did seem like a very sensible one, although I don't think we're going to remember the election campaign for a long time, because almost the benefit of it was that it wasn't memorable. It was just kind of, they didn't make any mistake. Well, one or two maybe, but nothing that really stuck.
No one can remember the mistakes. No one can really remember the campaign. Yeah. But who's come out with 174 majority at the end of the day, many new members of parliament, and a complete change in dynamism and momentum. And to come to the second part of your question there, John, I mean, this seems to me like something that everybody in our country needs to grab and push along with now. We have a massive chance for new momentum. Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, is clearly focused on growth. Both of those things are just what the public relations industry needs. It's been a slow time for us over the last few months. And I think many of us were looking, as we got through part of this year, that Sunak was not going to call an election until later in the year, potentially October, November. I don't think anyone thought he'd go to January. But the reality is bringing it forward to July not only suited us at Burson quite well because, of course, we were doing our merger and coming out, as it were, on the 1st of July. But actually, I think it's going to be great for the country. It's really going to be good for momentum. And you can see they're already pressing and doing that with all the initiatives that they've done since Friday. And I'm really kind of excited by many of the things they're already doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, fingers crossed that there is some positive momentum going on. So before we go to the merger and all the different questions around that, for people who don't know you and who you are, we obviously mentioned that you worked, quite a long time ago for Conservatives. That's your first job in comms. How did you get here from there?
I've come roundabout really, and I had quite an eclectic career, which I personally think is extremely valuable when you're doing public relations and when you're advising clients on reputation and corporate affairs issues and the whole gamut of what modern day public relations is. I mean, I literally, my first 10 years, I spent in investment banking, frontline investment banking, where I did energy and industrials, financings, M&As, IPOs, privatizations, project finance. I was then involved in politics for the couple of years, which was a really interesting introduction to campaigning, to the media, to press. You work in the press office during an election and you're under incredible and intense pressure 24/7. And it was a really interesting campaign for that. And then I did an MBA, which I did at Cranfield School of Management, which branched me out and away from finance and really took me into marketing and communications. And really, that's what I focused on. And also operations. How do you create efficiencies in business? So the first 10 years of my career were a completely different piece. I then have worked steadily through various different roles, getting different skills along the way. So first off, I started in public affairs. I actually worked for one of the large K Street lobby shops here in Europe, and I did a mixture of Westminster politics and European politics, a lot of it in Brussels for many big international companies. I then worked in financial public relations, where I was a partner in a firm doing energy and industrials, which has been a bit of a theme through my professional career. And of course, financial PR very much aligned with what I'd done in the city and allowed me to see the media, press and communications side of how you do big deals in M&A, how you bring companies to market, how you do capital markets transactions. And then I was asked to join Hill & Knowlton, and there was a position as managing director of their energy and industrials team. And I've been there for the last 12 years, 7 years of that doing energy and industrials work, which seems very specific, but covers both corporate and consumer and public affairs and digital and the whole gamut. And I worked my way up to be the global head of energy and industrials. And then the UK CEO actually went to the States. I was asked to be the CEO of Hill & Knowlton in London. And I've done that for 5 years. And just so proud to be now taking on the mantle of UK CEO at Burson. What a great opportunity and what an amazing company that's coming together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess, you've sort of worked in the kind of energy sector for a long time. That's obviously an area of some controversy sometimes. Various groups in the industry and connected to the industry kind of say that that's something agencies should be doing less of. Is that something you come across very often, that sort of criticism of working with those sorts of organisations? Is something that you're...
Not as often as you might think, John. I mean, I think, one of the great things about working in communications is that you have to be able to work across many different sectors and many different segments. And it's of no surprise to me that if you look at one of the key priorities and the key missions of the new Labour government is about green energy, renewables, and finding a new way for energy in the United Kingdom. So it's not just about old style energy, it's about the future of energy and the future of industrials and the whole decarbonisation message and the change, the energy transition. And, that is really what I focus on. I focus on the transition.
Right. So let's get into the merger. When did you first hear that the merger was happening and what was on the cards? And how was it kind of communicated to you and to other senior figures?
Well, I don't know necessarily about other senior figures, but I was tipped off 2 or 3 days before the announcement. And I was called by one of the senior people from New York to say, look, this is coming and can you just get ready quietly and prepare yourself? And that's what I did. And so I did know on the morning that it was happening, but I certainly wasn't telling anybody. But I think what that allowed me to do was to just get over the initial or let me call it shock of that, and process it and be ready to talk to people. I wasn't actually told that I was going to be the leader of the organisation in the UK until actually a few days later. But it was quite a good sign to me, one of confidence, and I could process it, which is what I did.
What sort of messages were they emphasising when they were speaking to you about it, about the reasons for doing it?
Well, a lot of it was about looking to the future and about investment in the business and about how we could grow something new and special. And I think particularly when you look at new technologies, particularly AI, and the way that industry communications is going to change so dramatically, there's going to need to be investment. And I think also it was about simplicity. It was about, a simple message about where communications is going and creating scale for the business. And actually the way that it's come together is extraordinary, really. I mean, BCW and H&K, you'd have thought two very different firms, actually very similar, had just grown in slightly different ways. And the complementarity of the firm within certain markets like London, but also in a geography like EMEA, is really quite dramatic. It's amazing how the firms have grown in slightly different ways. So the combination is +1 + 1 is 3, or 1 + 1 is even 5. But I would come back to that point. It's about investing in the right areas and being ready to do that, rather than maybe investing multiple times in multiple agencies. And that's really what the merger was about for me.
Yeah, because a lot of the initial noise was about cost cutting. And obviously that's always, you would have thought pretty much any merger, that's going to be, an element of it. I mean, to what extent do you think that was a really crucial element of it? Or was that more a kind of an inevitable sort of byproduct of bringing organisations together for scale?
Well, there's inevitably a cost element in a merger. And the investment community will be looking both at what can you save through simplification, but what can you then do in terms of the future and investment? So I think it is a bit of both, but I tend to focus on, where are we going as a company, rather than focusing too much on the cost aspect, though there have been some savings, without doubt.
Yeah. Let's talk about the kind of process in the early days, and it's all relatively early days, I suppose. Could you sort of describe how that sort of panned out, really? What were the kind of biggest logistical challenges that you faced?
Well, I always think that, mergers, and I've worked in finance, so I've worked on a number of mergers through that, but they tend to focus on people and integration, and then really on, clients. And clients is the most important part of that, because there is no business without the clients. But you also have to get your people settled. And you need to think very much in the first instance about structure of the agency, how's it going to operate, how are those people going to interrelate, what's the leadership, if you bring people together in different teams, how do you choose the leaders, how do you make the right choices, and how do you do that in a fair way, in a way where it's not beneficial to one side or the other, it's just we've got the best people in role. And I think most people are asked the question about, what's in it for them, how are they going to proceed in the organisation. And so getting people right is an extraordinarily important part of the process early on. Of course, the integration piece, all about systems, really. This is really where I think a lot of costs can be saved across time. It's about finance, it's about IT, it's about systems, it's about the technology you have, it's about real estate. And we, both BCW and H&K were actually in Rose Court, just south of Southwark Bridge, in the same WPP campus already. We've actually changed our office to come together, which has been extremely exciting to bring that together. But there's a process that you have to get going, and there's a process that's always ongoing in the background of a merger, and these things take time. But then really clients, getting to clients, talking to them, communicating about the rationale, talking to them about the future and what it means for them. And I've been highly delighted that clients have been so warm in welcoming the merger. They've asked us, what's happening to the people that we love. And of course, the answer is they're staying and they're with us and they're with you. And I've seen such a sort of a welling of great kind of warmth and good reaction to it from clients. But, you do have to go to clients, a bit like you have to talk to your people, and you have to explain and take them through things. And that's, of course, why a merger takes time, and why a merger, some of them don't work. I'm very glad that this one appears to be working very well.
Yeah, good. And I mean, We sort of spoke to people at the time who are now at Burson, who some of them were surprised. Obviously, the announcement took a lot of people by surprise, and there was an obvious fear that some had for their jobs. I mean, it must be a difficult atmosphere to operate in. How did you find the atmosphere at that time, and how did you kind of keep business ticking over while all that was going on?
Well, I mean, it was a surprise, and I think there was an inevitable logic to bring BCW and H&K together, but I don't think we expected it at that moment. But I welcomed it wholeheartedly, and in fact, the senior leadership team I now have also welcomed it. I think there was a little bit of uncertainty at the start, inevitably. People need to reorientate, they need to work out what it means for them. But, after that, I've seen really teams think through carefully what it means for our clients and how we can bring new capabilities and services to them, what it means for a new message to the market, what it means for them individually as people. And I think that we're only seeing the teams leverage those things very well. And I can see now a determination and a willingness to make it work. And in fact, I really do now hear in the background this feeling that, I can see the logic of this now, and I can see why bringing this together has made such good sense. And in fact, that's what clients are also saying. This makes great logic, it makes great sense, because it does bring more capability, greater scale, and more of a focus to WPP's public relations activities. And Burson is now that piece and focus for WPP. And I think if you look vice versa from that, the great thing is that it's more simple now to navigate our way into WPP for clients. And so lots and lots of benefits here. But yeah, you're right. Initially, uncertainty. And I think you need to take people carefully through that journey. And you need to explain to them what is happening to their roles, and how teams can come together. It's actually been much more smooth than I might have imagined. And I'm really grateful to everybody, particularly my senior leadership team, for helping me through that.
Great. No, that's good to hear. And it was interesting the way it was communicated, having a sort of steady stream of news really after the sort of big announcement. So, we had the various leadership teams, the news about Buchanan joining the financial PR agency, and then the merger of Axicom and Ideal as well. Why was this approach taken, and why wasn't it sort of all announced in one go?
Well, I don't think in any merger the stages of working through how certain things will come together, certain leaders will emerge, certain pieces of business will change, is all done in one go. It's never done in one go. It's always done across time. And if I remember back to what Corey de Brouwer, our global CEO, talked about, which was, we're trying to get this done by the 1st of July. And so there was always going to be a 5 or 6 month runway. And what's really been interesting to me is the way that we've been able to communicate really interesting milestones in that across time. And that has kept interest in the merger. It's meant that we can bring new people and show off our capabilities in different ways. And so, yes, these things get rolled out in stages, but we're in the communications industry, and actually communicating over time about new capabilities and a new company is precisely, I think, what the plan was.
So moving on, I mean, with any merger, things like replication of roles, I would assume is to some extent inevitable. Slightly downbeat question, but could you give us a sense of how many roles have gone as a result of the merger in the UK?
Well, it's literally a handful, and maybe a large handful, but a handful. And I think one could kind of look at cost in many different ways, but I tend to look at it as, look, we had 2 agencies who were looking after clients, very efficiently run, and actually we needed to bring those 2 agencies and keep the service for clients going. That doesn't necessarily mean that you're looking at big cost cutting in terms of people. In fact, the plan is to merely invest in really good people, to invest in new roles, and to bring people forward. What we have done is maybe not replace some of the people who might have left along the way. So we have had a small reduction in staff, but as I say, it's just been a handful, and certainly not what some of the scare stories were initially. So really glad about that. I can only see a future where we're now going to invest in talent and bring the best talent to Burson and therefore to our clients.
Good. And in terms of that talent, what kind of roles are you sort of hiring for at the moment? What's your sort of priority there?
Well, I mean, a lot of roles have been redefined. So we've got people who are now managing maybe slightly bigger teams, maybe are managing a slightly bigger portfolio. We've taken the chance to actually shake things up a bit and move people around the business just a little bit to give people a chance to do something new and fresh. Great chance to refresh the whole agency. I've had people in the UK business move into our EMEA structure. We've had 3 or 4 who've gone into our global structure. So in other words, there's a sort of a movement going on inside the business which refreshes while at the same time keeping continuity for clients. I've also, of course, created a new senior leadership team. I haven't announced that yet, and I will. But what an interesting and dynamic group of people to lead one of the largest agencies in London and to operate into our global structure. And then, if you look at some of the new pieces, you said a little while ago about Buchanan, what a fantastic capability that has now joined Burson. Hill and Knowlton and BCW didn't have a capital markets capability. And so here we have a really interesting London-based firm that is now joining us as Burson Buchanan. And that is providing a new capability. I think when you say what new roles are we hiring for, I think that's going to take time. I think we're going to look at really pulling the merger together. It's finished technically and done. But now, what do we do in terms of driving forward the vision of the new agency? What will it become? And how does London really become, furthermore, the engine room of growth for both EMEA, but also for global? Because we're very fortunate in London to have a highly sophisticated public relations market with a lot of great talent. And I'm interested in growing that and making sure that our clients can see the scale of that and grow with us, be it across new capabilities, new areas, new functions, but also across new technology.
So are you really keen that the UK is the sort of the fastest growing, the kind of engine of growth in the agency, or do you get in trouble with some of your colleagues for saying such a thing?
I don't think I get in trouble. I mean, I think you've got to be ambitious and you've got to want the best. And I think London, particularly with a new government and new momentum after a weak and tough few months, is seeing a re-emergence. I think London has traditionally been one of the centres in the world where we've seen growth, we've seen investment, we've seen new capabilities and great talent. I mean, the United States is clearly very much our centre, but actually EMEA happens to be our largest region at Burson. And we're seeing a huge amount of growth in places like the Middle East and the Gulf. We're seeing growth in Asia. We're seeing growth in other emerging markets. So can London still remain one of the really high growing parts of the agency? I don't know. We'll wait and see. I suspect there are some emerging markets who'll grow far faster. But can we in London be the centre of innovation, the centre of dynamism around things like AI, around new capabilities? Yes, I really believe we can. And that's certainly what I'm going to be focused on in the months ahead.
Great. Well, look forward to it. I'd like to ask a sort of cultural question, really. I mean, when you hear about mergers and you've got sort of two different entities, there can sometimes be that sort of lag of, oh, I'm an H&K person, I'm a BCW person. Are you sort of conscious that that might be a thing? And is there a way that you're looking at to sort of make one team Burson, if you like?
Well, of course I am. And I'm being quite deliberate because I think that's what you need to do, because it's just very easy for people to stay in their swim lane. And actually, what you get from a merger of this wonderful talent in London that we have is leverage and a multiplier factor if you can get people working together in different ways. So yes, I mean, I am looking very clearly at that. But that's not to say that people are lagging, and that's not to say that people are sitting back and sitting in the old structures. In fact, we've really brought people and teams together very quickly. We've merged them quickly, and they're operating together now in a very dynamic way. So I don't now look at anybody in any way as old H&K or old BCW. They're all Burson, and we are all moving forward together, and everyone's being treated exactly the same. But, for example, in new business pitches, I want the best people on the pitches. Of course I do. I want the best people for the clients. But if there's a way to bring teams together and to get BCW and H&K and Old Style working together, sure, I'll try and do that. And we're doing that as well when it comes to building culture in the agency. So how do we bring different levels together? How do we get people to meet each other? How do we get people to work together? We recently had a day together where we did creative tasks for a few charities. And that was all about not only creative ideas for charities, but also how can we get teams working together and being together and realizing that we're all actually focused on the same things in the same industry. And I've just been so surprised. Well, why would I be surprised? But I have been. That everyone I've met could have worked in either firm. And so we're all really strong practitioners in the public relations industry.
Good stuff. So one of the questions I was going to ask is kind of answered it to some extent. Are you noticing a real difference so far post-merger, and how have sort of clients reacted to things? Are the clients just happy that, for the most part, the people they were working with before are still there and it's just sort of business as usual on a day-to-day basis? Or, how are they reacting?
Well, I have seen a real difference. It's already a different buzz. There's already a different dynamic in the agency as people are refreshed and meet new colleagues and have different pieces. And actually, the capabilities we have are at greater scale and at greater breadth. And we have greater depth in what we're doing. And I think that is massively important in our industry. In the old days, one would talk about having a certain capability and one would slightly shuffle when a client asked for it. But those days, 10, 15 years ago, are so gone. You now need to have the depth of skill right there, right ready for clients. You say you do behavioral science, you'd better have your behavioral science team on hand, for example. And I think this merger has seen us really deepen that capability. I've seen new colleagues, new capabilities coming together, this greater sense of scale, both in the UK, but also then globally. So we can now reach out for clients into many markets which have much more scale in themselves. And of course, people are seeing that, clients are seeing that. I think if you look at the way BCW and H&K in the UK came together, the way that they'd grown over, particularly since COVID, both had grown really very rapidly. BCW had actually grown much faster in public affairs than H&K had, while H&K had grown much faster in creativity and data than BCW had. You bring those two pieces together, and my goodness, you've got a powerhouse in the industry. And I'll go back to what I said earlier about investment. We now have a focused investment strategy on new areas, on new capabilities, on new technologies like AI. I think the other piece, the big difference we've seen as well is Buchanan joining us. So we have now a capital markets piece. And, here we are working in the same building anyway. We've changed up the desks, we've changed up the office, and people are really coming together very, very well. And I think clients are seeing that. We're now ready with a simpler message, a message about reputation and how we're owning that space and how we can bring capabilities to clients that are of greater scale and greater depth. And clients are very, very interested to see that and want to understand what it means for them. Yes, they want continuity. It's interesting. They want continuity, but they want more ideas, more proactivity, and to see what else we're doing in the market.
No, it makes sense. And actually, seeing you mentioned AI, feels like a good thing to talk about. How are you finding sort of the AI strategy going? Where is Burson with AI at the moment?
Do I like to think that we're doing incredibly well in AI, but AI is going to disrupt everybody. It's going to disrupt every industry. It's going to really see great leaps in business. And I was, thinking about AI only, this morning as I read more articles. Businesses are really, really using AI as a way of making things more efficient, pushing things in a completely different way and doing things much more at speed and at scale. And no more so than in our own industry. I think there is a choice for agencies. Are you going to buy it in, or are you going to lease it in some way? Are you going to use off-the-shelf products? Are you going to rely on others to do it for you? Or are you going to build it yourself? And I think Burson has the best of all worlds, which is that we can use off-the-shelf products if we need it. We can partner with firms who have specific technologies, We have WPP that is spending a huge amount of money on the development of AI in marketing services and creative services. We're leaning on their creative studio and having the benefit of that. But we're also building our own capabilities and our own products and tools. And that to me is the best of it all. And I think if you look at some of the steps and strides that we're making, 18 months ago, it was quite nascent. It's now really coming to market. We have products and offers and services that are ready and which we're talking to clients about. And that's just so exciting in terms of the way communications is heading, the sophistication of communications, the way you can measure impact. It's a very, very exciting time. And of course, it is an absolute priority for us. And it's a priority that clients are asking us about more and more.
Yeah, great. And can you give us an idea of the types of products that you've got out there?
Yes, I mean we have several. I'll pick three for you. We have a product called Sonar. Sonar really is about anticipating and evaluating risk in communications, and that is about looking at what's happening on social media, what's happening on the dark web, what's happening in parts of the web that one might not necessarily go, and seeing what the chatter is and what messages are coming through that. And one can therefore use it as an early warning system for clients about what they might be doing. So they may be preparing something, and actually we can see something coming around the corner where you can then adapt and mold communications. And of course, that's particularly relevant to the likes of misinformation and disinformation, where you can then react to a piece of misinformation that may be coming at you and be able to, in some way mitigate against it. So Sonar, very much a risk tool. Decipher is another tool that we have. And, Decipher is all about really prediction. And I mean, this is the great thing about AI. If we can get down into predicting things that are going to happen in communications, well, there to me is the holy grail. But, Decipher is all about testing messages, testing spokespeople, understanding how things are going to land and how they're going to be accepted out in social media, media landscape more broadly. And what one can then do is plan scenarios which will allow you to see how something will land, and then you can twist and you can change and you can make sure that the right spokesperson is talking about the right message at the right time. So a really, really interesting kind of new type of early warning, but also predictive way of looking at communications. And the third product I'll talk about is a thing we call the fount. And the fount is really about assessing and integrating data, but a lot of that focused on measurement. So measurement and impact. And so at great speed now, we can look much more clearly at the life cycle of a campaign, how we're measuring it, what the performance is like, and looking at different ways of measuring that performance. And that literally can be, within minutes, one can see how a campaign is doing, rather than old style waiting for clippings to come through. One actually can really look at impact and then look at how campaigns compare to each other as well across time. So how is a client doing in terms of the impact of certain campaigns? So look, those are just three products that we have. We have a number of others, and we have a number of other suites that are looking particularly at some parts of generative AI and the creation of images, creation of text as well. So it's a broad suite of products and services that we're building in-house, and some of them we're building in close collaboration with WPP. So it is a very exciting time, and I could only see that being more and more of a priority and a focus for us, particularly as we look to help clients in this uncertain time.
I'm sure. A few other things. I mean, it was quite interesting that, when the announcement first came that the merger would happen on the 1st of July, that actually it ended up happening a couple of weeks before that. Why was that? Should we read anything into that?
No.
Or was that just the way things are?
The senior team at Burson gave a commitment to the WPP board that they would be ready by July the 1st. And that was the aiming point, and that was what we always said. So there was always going to be a runway to what is ostensibly the half-year point. So we'd be really up and running for the second half of the year. That was the commitment. But, when you have an event like Cannes that was there in the weeks just before that, a couple of weeks just before that. What a target to go at in order to launch your brand before that, and then be able to take it to Cannes, to launch it properly at Cannes. And the great thing about Cannes is that there are many, many clients there, and many prospective clients for us. So we were ready, and we were therefore able to launch it early. And I think it's been launched brilliantly, and I'm really proud of my colleagues who've done it. They've done it in super quick time. And I think the brand looks great, and the assets we have look terrific. And as I've said, it's been highly welcomed by clients.
Good. And talking of Cannes, do you have any sort of views on PR's performance there, and sort of generally how the festival has been evolving in the last few years?
Well, I think a lot of people far grander than I in the industry have talked at length about how this has been a breakthrough moment for PR, and I'm really glad that it has been. I think there have been some really terrific pieces of work. There's been some great creativity, and I think this is what we've seen in public relations, a real focus on creativity as the way to cut through. So we talk about things like reputation, and we talk about corporate services, we talk about campaigning and media, but actually what the industry has really grasped now is that creativity is the secret sauce to it all. And so you've seen agencies really invest behind that. I look at some of the campaigns that have come through. The Specsavers campaign was clearly a very interesting, novel, fun bit of work, and it had a real life outcome in that people saw Specsavers as not just an optician but also a group that did hearing tests, and I think that was a huge dynamic change for that group. I think I look at some of the other campaigns. Actually, my favourite campaign was the Bromley Football Club campaign, which was done with Xbox and Football Manager, where they put an advert out, Bromley put an advert out for someone to come and be a performance manager around the data and insights about how their team was performing. And they hired someone who, quite on purpose, who was a fantastic gamer in Xbox, the Football Manager product with Xbox. And I thought that was a really interesting way to launch the next part of Xbox and to really bring it to life. It was a really fun campaign, but also aimed at, of course, product sales. There's been a lot of focus on the Grand Prix. A lot of other agencies like BCW and H&K and Burson, of course, because that's what we were at Cannes, really came through with some interesting results too. Burson won a Cannes Silver and a Cannes Bronze, and also a Communique Award last week, which actually beat the Specsavers campaign in the category that it was performing in at that time, for a campaign which was done for the NHS Blood and Transplant Unit, which was called Waiting to Live. And that campaign, perhaps a bit more serious, perhaps a bit more an issue that wasn't quite so fun, but focused on organ donation and organ donation in children. There aren't enough organs for children who are on waiting lists, and the NHS wanted to raise awareness of this and wanted to get more people registering to give organs. And the campaign was exceptional. It got a huge amount of media attention. It was a really beautifully done creative campaign. It really cut through. And I thought one of the interesting pieces of it, if we're talking about real life outcomes, Specsavers had 1,000 people sign up to hearing tests. This organ donation campaign, Waiting to Live, had 5,000 more registrations of people willing to give organs. And I have to say that, to me, was a really strong piece of campaigning, strong piece of communications, made me very proud. And that, in fact, was a pro bono bit of work that BCW had done in London last year. So really proud and very excited for the team that it's seeing awards.
Yeah, good. It's good to hear. And, that sort of effectiveness and results element is something that, the industry sort of ignores at its peril, really. You've always got to prove it's not just creativity for creativity's sake by any means, is it?
Well, it's now all about the say-do gap. Are you saying things, and are you just saying things, or are you saying things and doing things, and they have to combine? And I think we're seeing that in all aspects of communications and all aspects of business. It's really where a lot about leadership goes, around authenticity, and do you do what you say, or are you just saying it? And I think a lot of what we found in modern day campaigning is that we're not just about communicating the aspects of things. It's about actually trying to influence change inside businesses and company action. And that, of course, is for me the holy grail about communications. It's not just communicating.
A couple more things before we go. It'd be good to get your sort of general views of the market at the moment. I mean, obviously we spoke about what we hope is a bit of a feel-good factor with the new administration, but how are you finding the sort of the sector in general? And as part of that, I guess the recruitment market, which is obviously going to be very closely linked to comms market in general.
Look, I think it's been an interesting last 3 or 4 years, if you look at it. We had COVID, and I think everyone thought that COVID for communications was going to be disastrous when we first were sent home. And in fact, we found that communication and the technology around communication had adapted very quickly, and we could get on with our work. And we were asked to do a range of very different things that were extremely helpful for our clients in difficult times. And then we saw the bounce back after COVID. And, we've seen extraordinary growth. I mean, Hill & Knowlton in London grew by 40% during the 2 or 3 years after COVID. BCW similar. So we saw a big bounce back, a big growth in client spend, in growth in terms of people. We recruited a lot of people. And that kind of growth is extremely unusual for the public relations industry. And we'd seen it in spurts before, but this was an extraordinary spurt. You normally would expect a big agency maybe to grow 3 to 5% a year if you're doing well. Here we were growing at 10, 15, 20% a year. And that sort of growth was never going to be sustainable in our industry. And of course, what we've seen is a weaker industry over the last 12 to 18 months. It has slowed a bit. I think that mirrors what we're seeing across professional services, marketing services. I mean, it's just been the way that it is. Clients have been more cautious. I mean, some budgets have been cut. There's no doubting that. I think people have felt that across the agency. And it's just been slower to get projects and campaigns signed off, because it's been slower inside our clients' businesses for people to get things signed off. And that's completely understandable. The world is uncertain. There are difficult things happening around the world, and there isn't a huge amount of money. And I think clients have just been cautious. And I think what people have been longing for is a stimulus to momentum. And, I think bringing the election forward to July, electing a new government with fresh thinking, with, a very progressive agenda is, I think, extremely helpful for the UK. I think Brexit has been a drag for business, but also for our industry in many ways. And we've now got a more pro-EU government. I mean, I'm not saying we're going to be rejoining the EU, but I'm saying they're going to be thinking more about how to have a more positive relationship with our market next door of 500 million people. And again, I think that's going to be positive momentum for the industry and for all of us. So a fresh approach, stimulation in the market, momentum. And as I said right up top, I'm seeing that already. I mean, I'm really seeing a genuine energy, and I'm seeing it in the agency this week. There's a lift as people look forward, think that things might be finally getting better. And I think that's only good for the industry. It's certainly good for Burson, and it's certainly good for our clients. And, I'm really hoping that many of the businesses in the UK recover well and go from strength to strength.
Great. That's really good to hear. So final question, what would you describe as your priorities for the year ahead now Burson, as the merger is complete?
Yeah, I mean, there are many, and I have a lot of things in my inbox, which is extremely exciting. We need to understand in the new environment what clients are thinking about. We need to think about what their needs are. We need to support them in terms of the next parts of their communications. We need to think about our people. We need to get them settled into this merger. It's finished, it's done, but we are, of course, bringing teams together. They're getting to know each other. We need to leverage that and to find our rhythm, which I think I'm already seeing in many places. We just need to get the whole organisation thinking about that. I'm looking forward at how can we leverage what we have from the two legacy agencies to really stimulate growth into a new high-performing agency of the future, looking at what the future of communications is around AI, technology, the next part of communications. And I think, if I look at specific aspects, I think public affairs is a very big part of what we're doing right now, particularly with a new government, new agendas for companies. Creativity, as I've said, is the lifeblood of it all. We have a very strong creative strategy team, a very strong group of creative directors. And I feel the whole notion of digital publishing and providing the right content through channels is a great place to prioritize and to look for growth. And then I just think, Buchanan, of course, I've mentioned before, how do we integrate a capital markets function into the mix? But then I think also, what are we looking at in terms of the breadth and depth of services that we provide? So we talk about reputation and how we are looking at clients' reputations and building, enhancing and protecting those over time. And how do we do that at scale? But really, how do we provide the depth in some of the services that we have? So sustainability and social impact, our crisis and issues offer, our change and employee engagement offer, our corporate affairs team, our training team, and just a gamut of other creative services and digital services as well. So it's a big integrated full service mix, and what an exciting firm and what an amazing time for the agency as we launch with new momentum, and I hope improving the reputation of the UK overall as we head into the next couple of years.
Great. Well, that sounds like a good place to end. And we are running out of time, unfortunately. But thank you so much, Simon, for joining us today and taking us through the Burson merger and your views of other things going on in the industry. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot, John. Enjoyed it.
Great. Well, if you enjoyed today's episode, we'd love it if you could leave a review, please, wherever you access PRWeek's Beyond the Noise podcast. Until next time, thanks for joining us. Goodbye.